talk about my daddy, it takes on a life. I never, ever called him anything else. He was always Daddy. My father. I can't even say it out loud as a normal conversation to anybody. My daddy. And I would tell somebody a story. When I was a little boy, grown-ups don't always know why little boys cry. But I learned from my daddy that sometimes, even when you're crying, it didn't bother him. And I fell off of that mule in a story I like to tell, and he snatched me up and shook all the sand off me. There was nothing in his eyes that didn't say anything to me, but he loved me and he cared and he was worried about what was wrong. When I was a little older, I found out my daddy gets distracted. He worked near Commerce Gallery in Jacksonville. I would ride a bus into town when I'd get off of school and go sit in Commerce waiting for him to get off work at 5 o'clock. I wasn't paying attention at the time. I got up and I could see him. He was getting in his car. I could see him. And I'm running down the sidewalk towards him as he drove out of the parking lot on the Riverside Avenue. I chased the car for 3 blocks. Red lights, everything. Daddy was in that world that he lived in. It was 6 miles home that day. When we lived on the other side of town, Daddy would ride a bus home. I would run out by the highway and wait for Daddy to come home, get off the bus. As the bus was coming and not stopping, Daddy was asleep against the window. Well, we all have things. My guiltiest thing with Daddy. I'm ashamed of my thing with Daddy. My guilt trip. He was taking me over to the church because we had a baseball league. And I was going to go play baseball. About halfway there, I said, I don't have my glove. In here, those wheels of my daddy started turning. And we went down Hendricks Avenue past Emerson. Now, anybody familiar with Jacksonville knows there's a red light there. Daddy didn't. At that day, no, there was a red light there. The motorcycle cop pulls him over. And he says to the motorcycle cop, well, I was all thinking about his glove that he didn't have with him, and I was distracted and I did. Guilty. Rest of my life, and I'm 70 years old, and I'm still guilty for getting him that ticket. We were camping in North Alabama, not far from Birmingham, and there was this incredible waterfalls at the park. I was scared to go out at night. We'd already camped in the Smokies and the bears were there. He says, he got this little bitty flashlight. Come on with me, we're going to go see the falls. I was too scared to go with him. So he left and went up there. There's my shame of, I wished I could have gotten out and gone with him. I grew up. Over the years, I found out something else very peculiar about Daddy. He could take 2 dimes and rub them like this and lose a nickel. Daddy, how do you do that? How do you not? He was literally the nicest man I ever met in my life. I've told that story way too many times over my life. When you say, who do you know is the smartest, who do you know is this, if you wanted to have lunch with somebody, the nicest person, not my daddy, was that man who also was my daddy. The nicest person I ever met. He could not take that dollar out of your pocket if you wanted it more than to buy something he was trying to sell you. He couldn't do it. He worked at the parking lot for City Hall at the city of Jacksonville. Pretty safe, pretty secure. He retired. He took his 4 years of not taking a vacation money from the city of Jacksonville and whatever else little bitty money he had, because he started there after 45 and he wasn't in on the retirement plan. Yeah. He moved to Action, Georgia. He moved across the street from my Uncle L.E. When you see my email address, it says Uncle L.E. He moved across the street from the house he was born in and built a house with his 2 hands. I would go and visit him. Up in the rafters, he had this half-built boat. He was building out of plywood. He couldn't figure out how to finish it. He couldn't figure out how to bend the wood. He couldn't figure out how to make things work. Okay. But he built that house he lived in. He went on a mission for his church to teach people how to do genealogy work. He ran genealogy libraries. His retirement years was wrapped around telling the truth. I wanted to write this really cool story about my family coming from North Carolina and how they got to South Florida, South Georgia, and how they got there and all the travels and the circumstances. You can't tell that story, Dave. Well, why not? Because you don't know for sure. If you don't know for sure, you can't tell that story. Daddy, you're taking away my storytelling. Here, I can tell y'all just about anything. But it eventually had to happen. Daddy got sick. And I went up to see him. I knew. I'd already been with him at the hospital. He had this weird stage something cancer with a certain classification. It was in here. It was inoperable. Chemo wouldn't have helped because it was right by his esophagus into his lungs. It was a really strange thing that happened to him. He got it from the carbon monoxide of the cars where he worked at the parking lot, sitting in the booth taking their money. He came and lived with me. So I went up to see him so I could help him figure out what to do. Jackie's in the house, and I'm asking her, where's Daddy? He's in the backyard. Okay. Go out in the backyard. Daddy, 83 years old with cancer, is building an electric lawnmower. Dad, what are you doing? They lived up on a steep hill, sort of, in Macon, Georgia. He goes, I'm tired of pushing that lawnmower and rolling down the hill. He kept falling and rolling down the hill. So he was building an electric lawnmower. It had a nice flat bottom. The wheels were far apart. And he was mounting an electric motor to run a blade down through. Okay, Daddy, you built your own house, you built a lawnmower. Okay, I get it. You can't do some things, but some things you can. He came to my house for his final days. He goes, David, it's going to hurt. I said, what part? He goes, the dying. It's going to hurt. I said, Daddy, it's not going to hurt the way you think it is. Well, it's just got me concerned. And I just wish that a little something had happened in my life that would have been different. Where all of the beliefs and all the religious values I have and all the things that led up to right now, there could have been just a little glimmer of truth. Laid him on the couch one night because he was stirring and he just couldn't get relaxed. So I sat in a recliner next to him. He had a skull cap. He'd pull it down over his head. Keep his head warm because he was bald-headed. He'd take the cap and pull it up and look over at me. Daddy, I'm right here. And all night long he did that to me. And all night long I'd look over and go, Daddy, I'm right here. Now I'm not sure. I'm just saying it happened. I'm not sure how I kept waking up. Till finally, the thing happened in my life that I can never deny. I saw love. I didn't see the epitome of love. I didn't see the image of love. I saw love. How do you describe seeing love? My Uncle L.E. walking with a cane, barely able to get in the house, came in to see his brother. They were in the living room, and they were chatting and talking. And I stayed nearby because, in case Daddy needed anything, this is the time. This is it. And they stood up. They stood up to say bye. And they stared at each other. It lasted forever. I couldn't figure out what to do, so I went in the kitchen to make Daddy a glass of ice water. Now, this is me trying to make time go by, because I was still not hearing anything. No noise, no action, no nothing. So I came back around the other side of the kitchen. Daddy and his brother were still standing there staring at each other. If this is not the time you see actual love, I don't know what it is. It still lasted and lasted. They stood there. A lifetime of being brothers was passing between them. The kind of thing, I don't know how anybody could have endured what I saw. Daddy could barely stand up. Uncle L.E. was using a cane to just stand there. It finally was over. Now we're getting to the end. Whew. Daddy says to me, now you know all those years you were an engineer and you were doing inspection work. When you get up there, I want you to inspect the vault. What for? He goes, I want you to make sure it don't leak. Daddy, what is it you're wanting me to do? He wanted to make sure that tar material around the edge of the concrete vaults that they set the casket in did not leak. Okay, Daddy. Anything you want, and I want you to stay with me till it's over. Daddy, well, think about this one now. What is it you're now asking me to do? Daddy is from South Georgia. They have wakes. They have the kind of wakes where the body is in a bedroom. He's being taken to a funeral home. He wanted me to stay with him. We got him up to Douglas, Georgia. I slept the night in that funeral home. They apparently were familiar. They brought me pillows and they brought me a blanket and they had a couch for me to use. I can tell you, I did not feel one moment of stress, strain, or worry, or a fearful experience of being there. A couple times in the night, got up and read to her as he was laying there in the casket. I wondered in my mind if I could conclude my life with Daddy in a super positive way. I was thinking about this. The next day, funeral hadn't happened yet. Still got a whole nother night to go through. If you have things happen in your head and you hear it and you sound it, is it a vision? Was it a dream? Did I just have a daydream? What was it? Daddy started talking to me. He said, hey, you know, I always thought my mom would come for me. He started laughing. Daddy had this infectious grin that would just make you crazy. You'd just smile. He goes, Dave, it wasn't her. It was Pa. he came and got me and said, come on, son, I got something to show you. And he says, David, he showed me how to finish that boat. Dad. And he goes, listen, we're through. You're through. And he goes, yeah, you can't believe what I can do here. Oh my gosh, look over there. And he was gone. And I never heard Daddy's voice again. I never felt like I needed to go to the funeral home again. Everything I had felt about Daddy, he let go of me. And I can live with all of the stories, all the good ones. Daddy never, I said this out loud tonight and it feels good to say it, Daddy never spanked me. I remember running my mouth as I always was as a little boy, and remember Daddy sitting in the other end of that living room, dining room, and a book slamming against the wall above me as I was laying on my little night bed. But he didn't spank me. He got my attention. Shut up. Daddy? I guess I'd been running my mouth too much. And we were at Kingsley Lake, down by Camp Landing, and we were out there where the docks are, and I was scared because we were walking on a dock with no rails. And he goes, you know how to swim? He says, you know how to swim? Daddy, I'm scared. I was all scared. He grabbed me and threw me off the end of the dock. He says, swim back to shore. I think I heard Mama screaming at him. I'm not sure. So he started walking along that dock as I was dog paddling to beat myself to death. As my hands scraped on the sand and I stood up, my little 4 or 5-year-old body, I realized, I said, what am I doing? Daddy had a way of making every day feel like an okay day for me. And I will never, ever call him anything else but my daddy. Thank you. That was hard.
Well, how apropos for Father's Day. Fantastic. Thank you, David. Kathy Canary, my uncle.